All right, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And if everyone still might be getting settled, but that's all right. I'm just going to go ahead with a short introduction here. So thank you all for joining us today. My name is Jay, and I'm the office manager here at Standpoint. I just wanted to begin today by reminding folks that this webinar is being recorded. When the recording link is available, it'll be sent out to our legal advocates listserv and also added to our YouTube channel and website. My role today is going to help facilitate the webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type your question in either the Zoom chat or the Q&A tab, and I'll make sure our presenters are able to address your question today. Most of you probably know about our organization already, but for those that are listening later, Standpoint serves the entire state of Minnesota. We are a team of attorneys and advocates working to assist individuals who have experienced domestic violence, sexual violence, and trafficking when it includes domestic or sexual violence. We do this through answering calls to our action line. Our action line is answered Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 4, and it's through our action line that our attorneys provide legal advice and our advocates connect callers with resources, safety plan, listen, and help identify possible options and next steps. Standpoint also provides assistance to systems professionals who work with survivors. Our staff facilitates trainings such as our annual new laws throughout the state of Minnesota, monthly webinars for advocates such as this one, and other trainings by request. Now I'm going to share with you in the chat the Dropbox to the PowerPoint presentation if you'd like to follow along today. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenters. We have Rana Alexander with us today, Standpoint's Executive Director. She has worked in the domestic and sexual violence field since 1997. Ms. Alexander joined Standpoint, formerly known as the Battered Women's Legal Advocacy Project, in 2005. Ms. Alexander became the Executive Director in 2016. As an attorney for the statewide organization, she provides legal advice and consultation to domestic and sexual violence victims, advocates, and attorneys on legal issues that affect domestic and sexual violence victims. Ms. Alexander also provides training and outreach to attorneys involving issues of domestic and sexual violence and the law. Ms. Alexander is a graduate of Northeastern University School of Law in Boston, Massachusetts, and received with distinction her Bachelor's of Science degree in psychology and a minor in women's studies from Iowa State University. Synavone is our Director of Organizational and Staff Development. She has worked in the domestic and sexual violence field for over 20 years. brings to Standpoint extensive knowledge and experience around providing advocacy to survivors, management of special programs, coordination of events to promote awareness about DV and SV, and facilitation of trainings on varying topics as it relates to DV and SV survivors. In particular topics focusing on victimization of immigrant and refugee populations. Graduated from the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault's Leadership, Education, and Advancement for Professionals in 2015, and has continued to train nationally about leadership development for women of color. Is a graduate from Augsburg College with a dual major in political science and communications, and she also has a master's in public and nonprofit administration from Metropolitan State University. With that, I'm going to toss it off to Rana and Ty.
Wow, we're really smart, Ty. Holy cow.
I know. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Jay.
So funny. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Today's presentation is titled Stalking and Cyber Abuse, What Advocates Need to Know. And it's going to be me and Rana talking to you today. Any questions you all have, just go ahead and pop it into the questions tab and we'll answer them throughout the presentation. We're really here just to provide you general knowledge and information around cyber stalking. So this won't go into too much detail around the specific ways, but really just an overall knowledge around cyber stalking and how it looks. So while cyber stalking and traditional stalking have some differences, the negative impacts on victims' privacy and well-being are similar to each other. Stalking victimization includes a pattern of harassing or threatening tactics that an offender will use to cause fear and safety concerns for the victim. And now with the internet and with technology being an integral part of our personal and professional lives, cyber stalking has continued to become a growing problem. I want to share with you all some statistics that I found while doing some research. The Cyber Civil Rights Initiative reports that 47% of stalking victims in the United States reported being stalked through technology, and that's through things like email, social media, or instant messaging. The Bureau of Justice Statistics reports that 14.2 million people over the age of 18 in the US has experienced stalking in 2019, and that 1 in 4 victims reported some form of cyber stalking. A survey was also done by the Pew Research Center that found that 41% of Americans have experienced online harassment, with mostly younger adults and women more likely to experience that. And just to keep in mind that all of these statistics that I'm sharing, seem like it's high, but it's important to note that cyber stalking is often underreported. For today's presentation, we have 4 main objectives. The first one is we're going to define what cyber stalking is. Then we're going to discuss prevention strategies. Rana is going to go through and talk about the current laws that protect victims. And then we'll talk about documentation and how to preserve and what type of evidence do you need. So what is cyber stalking? Cyber stalking really is the use of the internet or other electronic communication technologies to harass or threaten someone. Cyber stalking behaviors can include tracking down someone's personal and private information, using it to make them afraid, texting them hundreds of times a day to let them know that they're being watched, creeping on their social media accounts to learn where they are so they can show up uninvited. Can also include things like posting about them without their permission. The common denominator is that the behavior makes the target concerned for their personal safety and causes fear. All right. So methods of cyber stalking. I'll quickly go through these because I know we've talked about this and a lot of you probably have already heard about some of these things. But some of the main methods is through email. That's sending the repeated threatening emails. Social media, posting harmful content, sending messages, creating a fake profiles. Doxing. Doxing is when they release personal information online about someone. So that could be like their address, their phone number, other information or data that they have on the person. Or it could be hacking. And that is when you gain unauthorized access to online accounts or devices to monitor and to harass. GPS tracking. So the use of GPS technology to track movements or location. And non-consensual dissemination of private images. That's when they share intimate or sexual images or videos of someone without their consent. And impersonation. So that could be, again, like creating a fake profiles or just fake images and things like that. Cyber stalking can be distressing and cause emotional and psychological effects to those experiencing it. And although you can't fully prevent someone from doing harm to you when that is their intent, there are some strategies that you can do to try and prevent it. And so we'll briefly talk about that as well. Readily ask when someone comes to your office and talks to you about maybe when you're doing a safety plan or maybe talking about safety, ask, do you have a computer? Do you use a computer? And does the abuser have access to it? I know sometimes that we don't ask this question, or maybe the abuser might not live in the home with them, but sometimes asking if they actually have access to it, or is there some way that they might have had access to it in the past? That's also helpful information to ask too. Safety planning around ways that an abuser might have installed or be trying to install spyware. So talking about that, most organizations probably at this day and age probably already have a safety plan around technology. If you don't have a safety plan around technology, I suggest you draft one up. I know I've created one well, my time here at Standpoint. So if it's something that you all are interested in, you can send me an email and I can share with you what I have created around a safety plan for technology. Or, there's lots of resources too online for that. And if spyware is detected, we strategize around that, involving police and how to be safe while doing that, not wanting to alert the abuser. So sometimes also have discussions around using a safer computer. That can be a computer maybe like the library or a friend's computer. When they are doing things that they don't want the abuser to know about. So this might be like scheduling of appointments or researching, shelters or researching resources and things like that. So continue using of the computer that they currently have. But when they are gonna be doing searches and things on the internet, to use another computer, a safer computer for that. And also talk about, how to keep personal identifying information offline. So that's also another component of just a safety checklist to do. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit around like the spyware, checking to see all of that, but installing of antivirus and anti-spyware software is going to be important, but this only is helpful if the computer has not already been compromised. And because if it has been compromised already, these strategies aren't going to help. However, if they happen to have a brand new computer, these steps here will help minimize the chances of a spyware being installed by an abuser. So firewall is a computer security system that attempts to control access to and from your computer over the internet. So firewalls come in two forms. It could be hardware and software, and it's always a good practice to have one of each if that's financially possible. It's important to remind that installing two software firewalls does not create added protection. In fact, it might create more problems because those two software programs will attack one another. Antivirus programs scan incoming email and look for viruses on the computer. It might catch a spyware program, especially if it came in attached to an email. Sometimes they're hidden with a greeting card. Sometimes they're hidden with like a link, things like that. So we also need the antivirus programs. However, they may or may not prevent a spyware program. Some of the protections that firewalls can offer, they're like a gatekeeper, right? They stop that incoming traffic coming into your internet connection and just make sure that the information is allowed to enter, and also stop outgoing info and ask for the secret passcode. Firewalls don't usually analyze what information is coming through, just which programs are allowed in and out. So if a spyware program was trying to send reports over the internet, a firewall might catch it. There are many good firewall programs out there, and we should all just have one installed on our home and work computers. Zonealarm.com, they offer a free one. Norton also has some that is for sale, but there are a lot of other options out there. Just remembering that a firewall might not stop a spyware program. However, if it looks like a legitimate email going in or out, that might stop it. That might not stop it. Okay. So particularly around safety in online spaces, we hear from advocates that they're concerned sometimes that survivors won't give up their social media network sites. But to be honest, like social media really is a support system for survivors. And sometimes it probably is the only safe way for them to stay in contact with friends and family. So, suggesting or asking survivors to give up their social networks should not be the only solution, right? We should talk about privacy tips and security tips and things if that is a means that they use to keep them connected to their support systems. So talking about the privacy settings, with most social networks, you can change the settings so that it locks it down and the information is private. Also remembering that as advocates, we don't make decisions for the people that we're serving. We provide them with information. We talk about the pros and cons of things as we are suggesting things, and then allow them to make that decision for themselves. Another thing that people might forget about is it's not only the victims' social media accounts that we need to be aware about, but talk to them about their children's use of online spaces too, as well. And then also like social media accounts and things, and just not only the social networking sites, but other ways that their children are using online spaces, because the settings and things on that might also leak information to the abuser without them realizing it. So reviewing all of the privacy setting and options for any of the social networks that they're on, any of the online spaces that they're using frequently and things like that is a really important safety step to take.
Hey, Kai, we have a question,
Mhm.
and somebody's asking if we are going to address red flags that might indicate spyware if you do not catch it in an incoming email. And so because this is a webinar that is being recorded and then will live on our YouTube channel, Kai and I have to do a fairly general training around tech safety because we do not want to record a bunch of information that then could be used by stalkers or folks. We don't want to give any tips or tricks to the people who might want to use this against our folks. So we're trying to keep things more general in this instance. We do have trainings that address those things, but we would that would not be one we would do in a recorded type session. And so yes, or reach out. We're happy to have those, Ty are happy to have those conversations with folks, but for this particular situation, we don't want to record those tips and tricks. So we're gonna not include that today.
Yes, definitely. And I know, when I do more of the in-person trainings or trainings by request for organizations, which we are happy to do, we can talk specifically about, scenarios or different solutions and things like that. But while we're being recorded, it's just a practice that we don't get really into the details on all of that. But our information, our email is available, and so just email us any questions that you have. Talking about safety, privacy, and profiles. So it's important to add this first question to regular safety planning that we do with survivors, especially if they're trying to flee their relationship and relocate. Also, we're increasingly seeing problems with abuser posting fake or false profiles of survivors. This can often be really difficult to deal with. Some websites and hosting companies are easier to work with than others. Later on in the presentation, I'll talk about how to take down of some information and sites and things like that. But we have heard from Yahoo in the past that if someone posts a fraudulent website in the name of a survivor, if the survivor sends a copy of their driver's license, picture ID, and a letter requesting removal, Yahoo will remove that posting. And just, the questions here on the slide are some example questions that you can talk about with a survivor, asking if any of this has happened before, have they ever posted any information? But just remember to take that technology abuse seriously. We've had callers share with us that it's not taken as seriously. Even when they report it to law enforcement, it's just kind of brushed aside. And so, particularly as they are sharing about technology abuse, a lot of times it's some of the things that are shared, I'm not even sure if it's possible that it can be happening, but always making sure to communicate that. It's not that I don't believe you, I just need to do some research to figure this out or things like that, but trying not to make it seem like we don't believe them or that that we're not taking it seriously. All right.
So stalkers and abusers are going to seek victim information, especially once when they separate, or even while they may still be together. And there's a lot of information out there about us on the internet. So there's a lot of information in various directories and search engines. There's stuff on court and government sites. Folks may have other types of individual pages or blogs. They may be using Reddit. They may be using some other social media site. They might have a Discord. And then there's also our own organization web pages, or other types of organizations or companies' web pages that might be providing information about individuals. An odd thing that recently happened is somebody reached out to our organization, to Standpoint, to talk about, wanting to talk to our chair of our board, because that's how they found information, through our website, that they were on our board. And that's how they got to us. So there's all sorts of stuff that's out there that we need to be thinking about, and how, and then if we're talking to a victim survivor who may have specific concerns around technology safety, are we figuring out how to protect that information, or not have that information out in the public sphere if somebody is trying to not be found by their abuser or their stalker. Next slide, please. And so these things show up in a variety of different ways. One, there are the various free databases that know all sorts of information about people. Spokeo is just one of many, 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 many databases that exist out there, where you can get a variety of information about an individual. And this information is going to go quite beyond things like the phone book, which would have, back in the day when phone books existed. I feel like I'm really dating myself by talking about phone books. But back in the day when phone books, those are things that would have had simply like your name, your address, and your phone number. These types of databases go well beyond that information. So as you can see, all right, in this one, you can see, so I put myself through Spokeo, so some of the information may be accurate. Some of the information is not accurate. I do live in Minnesota. It says you can find me in Minneapolis and Minnetonka. I'm not really sure. My parents used to live in Minnetonka a very long time ago, and I haven't lived in Minnetonka in a very, very long time. But for some reason, they seem to think that that's where I might be. There is information here about who might be related. So they have a former, I used to be known as Rana Suzanne Alexander Fuller. That was my married name. And so somewhere they still have that as my name. I'm now Rana Alexander. They do have the various places that I have lived under Rana Suzanne Alexander Fuller. Both, I did live in Ames, Iowa. I went to Iowa State. I did live in Jamaica Plain. That's when I went to Northeastern. And I lived in Ankeny while I was at Iowa State. They have people that I'm related to. I have no idea who the heck Priscilla Fuller is. No clue. Got nothing. Joshua Fuller's my ex-husband. That person I was related to, but I'm not anymore. Oddly, none of my actual family is included in any of this information, but okay. And then they have a variety of names for me, which of course would be complicated because I was Rana Suzanne Alexander Fuller, which is a very long name, back when I was married to my first husband. My average age, down below, they have some statistics about me, is 42, which is fascinating and makes me happy because I'm older than 42. So I'm like, yay, I think I'm younger. Somewhere it thinks I make $125,000 a year. I need to know that, Rana Alexander, because that is not this Rana Alexander. I do not make that much money at all. It knows that I am 100% Caucasian, which is accurate and weird. How does it know my ethnicity? Oh. And it also knows that I am 0% married, which is also very true. I am 0% married, which is another odd way of putting it. For a while, there used to be a Rana Alexander who had similar, that was probably split because similar, like lived in the same places, knew the same, like related to the same people. But that person was 96 years old, which was not me. I'm not 96. But somewhere along the line, I think that information about me has fallen off. But it is useful. Go to these sites, search yourself. If you're working with a victim survivor, they should search themselves. You can have this information taken down. It's a little bit of a pain and you have to go to each one. But there is a process for getting this information taken down. For me, I'm not, you know, I'm out there enough through training and because of the agency that this basic information about me is kind of already there if you want to go find it in a variety of different places. So I don't personally worry too much about it. But absolutely, you may be working with victim survivors where that's a pretty serious thing that they do need to worry about. So check out the sites, run it for yourself, find out what they think they know about you. Some of it will be accurate, some of it's not going to be. Have a good chuckle, but then also keep in mind in working with victim survivors who may be trying to hide from an abuser, to run their names through these things and consider going through the process to get their information removed. Also note that you have to ask them every so often, and I don't remember, it's like every year, every 2 years, every 5 years. I don't remember how often. It is not once you ask, then forevers and evers and evers, you are removed from these sites. It is something that you have to actively do on a regular-ish basis. So keeping that in mind too when you're talking to victims, letting them know that just because you did it once doesn't mean you're not going to have to keep doing it again and again and again. So frustrating, annoying, but also important, and especially as a victim gets farther and farther away from leaving their abuser and maybe setting up different homes, to make sure that their location, that's kind of the biggest one that I see concerns around, that their location is not ending up on one of these public sites. All right. Another place that information is readily available is court and government sites. So I have here for your perusal, for briefly, we have Hennepin County Property Search site. And so for anybody who owns a home, while you cannot search by name, you can search by address. And not only can you search by address, if you don't know the address, you can click under the interactive map. So if you have a general idea where somebody might be, a street, a block, a section, if you are diligent enough and you care to know that badly, which of course, as we know, stalkers and abusers seem to have all the time in the world, no time for lots of things that we would like them to be doing, but all the time in the world to do these types of things. You can click through the interactive map on each house or each property to see who owns that property. Maybe I might have once done this. I was going on a date with somebody and I happened to know that it came out in conversation, the area of which they lived in. And I wanted to see if they legit own their house because they were telling me they did. And I wanted to check the situation. So I went in the interactive map and I clicked on the various properties in that area. And I did find out that that person, in fact, did own their home. I have used this in other ways. There was a number of years ago, folks probably don't even, because it's so long ago, but there was a situation where there was supposed to be a direct deposit into the HCMC, Hennepin County Medical Center, into their accounts, to their bank accounts. There was a mistake by one number, and a very large sum of money, something like $3 million, accidentally went into some individual's bank account. That individual did not tell anybody initially about all this money that they had received in their bank account, and instead went and spent a fair amount of that money. And then their conscience kind of got on them and they called somebody, and I don't remember who they called, and asked some questions about, I think they called the bank, and they started asking some questions, and it raised some red flags at the bank, and the bank realized the error and then was trying to get this money back. There became problems, and ultimately that person was arrested for committing fraud and stealing money, and was prosecuted. This story then became news. The same day, my neighbor, when I was living in a different area, my neighbor down the street had their house raided by the police. And so this raised a lot of questions of, is it the same person? And so I went first to the property search because I knew which house had been raided, and I looked up their address and I found the name of the person who lived there. I then went to the jail roster for the county that this had happened in, and I looked up their name to find out their name. Or I looked for them on jail roster because I knew they had been arrested, and I found their name, and I found their court file number. And from there, I put their court file number, I popped it into this is back when it was MPA. I put it in MPA, and I was able to look up the case and find out what happened, and in fact confirm that the person down the street from my house was the same person who had been charged with this crime. That's just me being weirdly nosy about what's happening in my neighborhood and having clearly way too much time on my hands that day, where I probably should have been watching Survivor or something. This is, well, again, a long time ago. But just as an example of how easily accessible information, this didn't take a lot of work. It didn't take any particular knowledge on my part, just knowing that you can get information from the property search and find out names because that's what's required. And that knowing what is available under our court's databases and just using the two in a way to be able to come out with the answer that I was looking for. Keep in mind that even now with MinCro, that we've fully moved from MPA to MinCro, that even more information is available on MinCro, that we can get access to. A lot of documents are on MinCro, mostly under criminal and under family law. You can see court orders. So there's even more information that is out there on MinCro than even what you could see before with MPA. So keeping in mind, there's a lot of information that's out there about us. So it's important to remember there, like I said, there's a lot of stuff that's out there. You have information brokers that are websites. That's that Spokio would be an example of that. They collect all this information. They scrape it from a variety, it's called scraping, from a variety of different places, from phone books and credit reports and consumer surveys, warranty cards. You remember those warranty cards? There's a reason why they want you to fill those out. It's because they sell that information to information brokers. Voter registration databases are public information. Other types of public entities, they sell this information out to a variety of different people, whether that be media, to the police, and then even some of it ends up out to criminals or people who want to do us harm. So keeping in mind that anytime that you're and talking with your victim survivors about anytime you're providing information, who is really getting that information, and is that information that could be shared outside of that relationship. And then also is keeping in mind, as we know, data breaches are really common in this day and age, and they have been for a number of years. And so making sure to be thoughtful and cautious about what we're sharing with people, we can keep data confidential. So how is all of this relevant to victims who might be trying to hide from their stalkers? It's really important to be thinking backwards and forwards at the same time. One of the most important things I think is to remember is that most victims are actually going to be found through information that's already in the public domain, through family and through friends. So I always tell folks to start. So you use Occam's razor, and basically that's a philosophy principle that says the simplest explanation is usually the best one. Absolutely, there are domestic violence and sexual violence and stalking victims that are having they have spyware on their phone or spyware on their computer, or some sort of tracking device has been placed on their car, or other higher tech activities are happening to get additional information about them, or cameras are being placed in their own. That happens, yes. But let's always start with the most simplest option. And that's going to be, there's a bunch of public information about you out there on the internet. And so what information is the victim survivor putting out about themselves? What information already exists out there? Are they using Facebook and their Facebook page is public? Are they using Facebook and they are still friends with their abuser's best friend? Are they using Instagram, which, or TikTok? So what are the various ways that they may be putting information out into the ether that their stalker might be able to get access to easily, right? So let's start with that basic and then work again, forward and backward. So start with the easiest explanation and then move to things that may be more serious.
Piggybacking on what you're saying, Rana, I just want to say this because it popped in my mind, and I know a lot of times for me here at Standpoint, I'll get phone calls from victim survivors who are from different backgrounds, from different cultures, right, from different countries coming here into the United States, and most have cell phones. Most don't have laptops. They have cell phones to call their friends and family. They have a Facebook account, and they created a Facebook account, but don't really know about the settings, And so a lot of times it's so true about spending that time to talk about, hey, did you know? Because when English isn't your first language, but you want to be able to utilize some of the technology and some of the things, like you're just going to do the basics, and that is mostly what I'm seeing is they're just creating a Facebook account, easily done. But the step of going through the settings, going through, setting their privacy settings and going through all of that, that's the step in which they don't know. And as advocates, taking that time to talk to them about that, taking that time to go through each step with them is really going to be helpful. And another suggestion is, all those sites that Rana had already suggested about doing that search, I do that. I do that with them. I type in their name and just see what comes up. Sometimes it's news articles. Sometimes it's just so many random things. Sometimes you get pictures. I do want to say though, prior to doing a search with them, like preparing for them for maybe the worst, you never know what you're going to find when you do a Google search. So I, testing it out, did a Google search on myself too. And the amount of information that came up about me was just ridiculous. And even some information in which was not accurate and things that I had already resolved, but it came up and it's alarming because some of the places that I resolved it with, they might have took it down, but there were other places that brought it back up. And so just that frustration alone for me, who is not even trying to flee anyone, who is not trying to seek safety, who I'm not super concerned about my safety as far as privacy, but I still want my information to be private, right? But just keeping that in mind that if you are working with someone who, English is not their first language, spend that extra time in going through these extra steps with them and talking around that. And don't make assumptions that, they don't speak English, like they're not using technology or whatever, like not to make assumptions like that. But definitely taking that extra time to go through some of that information with them.
Absolutely. That's really great, Ty, for sure. And I really encourage folks, when you're helping the victim survivor Google themselves, go back more than just one page on Google, because I promise you, a stalker, the abuser, is going to. And so find out, and one time I was researching somebody that I was dating. You gotta do these things. And I went back like 3 pages, but I was able to find he played high school hockey. And I was able to find information about that. Now, I could, not much for me, whatever, cool, in high school you played hockey, but thinking about how could that information in the hands of a stalker or an abuser or somebody who would like to have a relationship, how could they use that information moving forward, where there are folks that may have nefarious type thoughts. So making sure to not just look at the first page and to keep going to figure out what else might be there. And really considering it if you have somebody who has a more unusual name. you know, somebody like Ty and I have more unusual names. We are much easier to find on the internet. And somebody who may have the name like, you know, John Jones, well, that's going to be a much more difficult find, more than likely. Oh,
Yeah, I'm the
also,
only one. I'm the only one in the whole world, apparently. When I do a search, it's just me in
I'm
my area.
I'm
So,
oddly not the only one. Isn't that
so
weird? That there are other ones of me. There are other Rita Alexanders running around, which I think is very fascinating.
no, but it's, yeah. I wish there was other Thai cinnamons running around because there's that.
Well, Ty should have had a kid and named them Ty, and then that probably would have been resolved, and there would have been a problem. Anyway, so it's really important that your safety planning incorporate privacy planning and explore all the technologies in the various different databases, and that you're talking to victim survivors about how to remove their information and how to avoid it getting published in the first place. And always keeping in mind that this is complex and it's highly individualized. But it's important to have these conversations with victim survivors, especially if they have particular concerns that their abuser is stalking them. All right, so some victim survivors, they may be experiencing the level of stalking or cyber abuse that is happening may rise to the level of a variety of crimes. Before I move on to crimes, asking the question about at what point does snooping become stalking? Especially for those of us who might be still in the dating realm, I totally agree. And there isn't a very solid answer, I think, on that. I know that there have been times where I was like, oh, I got to page 4 on Google, now I'm stalking. Like, I totally hear that. And I feel that, like, and I think for us, because of what we do, it's way more on our minds, right? Like, I am way more likely to get nervous and be like, "Ooh, is that harassment? Is that stalking?" Whereas, like, I tell my friends and they're like, "No, that's totally fine." So,
Yeah. I think when you're using the information to like threaten someone or
well, clearly,
harm them in a way or things like that, but I think, you know, there's pros and cons to technology, and that's part of what I always like to emphasize. Like, it's also good for you, Raina, to be able to do some of this research, right? Because people like, I mean, people lie sometimes, and do you want to potentially get involved in a relationship with someone who's lying to you? So back in the day, that wasn't an ability to be able to do, but now, current day, it is, and more technology is coming out that's going to allow us to be able to do it quicker and faster, and even more alarming in ways. But I think people do this, and as long as you're not doing it in a way where you are using that information to manipulate, hurt, harm, stalk, create, you know, damaging things to them, extort them in a way or whatever, like, that information is out there. And so if it can help benefit you for your own safety, I think that it's okay. But
excellent, Ty.
it's a
That was
good check.
actually exactly what I was going to say. So
Mhm,
I totally agree.
mhm.
Absolutely. Crimes to think about. So if you're working with a victim survivor and you're feeling like some of the things that have happened as it relates to cyber stalking or some sort of technology abuse, things to think about. If it's something that the victim survivor is thinking about reporting to law enforcement, keep in mind that law enforcement on the regular aren't dealing with identity theft or interference with privacy, right? These are not crimes they are regularly seeing, right? Law enforcement, they regularly see assault, DWI, right? Like, that's the stuff that they regularly see. So they may not be very familiar with some of these crimes, which is understandable because it's not what they see every day. And so there may need to be some, I don't even want to say education, but maybe reminder about that there are these variety of different statutes out there, these different crimes that exist, that might be able to be used to prosecute somebody if they're violating them. So just keep that in mind, that law enforcement might need some reminders about some things that are out there, because again, they don't deal with this every day. Some things to think about: you can have sexual extortion. which is a newer statute that was passed in Minnesota a couple of years ago. Also, a reminder that sexual extortion is considered domestic abuse under the Domestic Abuse Act, so it qualifies one for an order for protection if they have the requisite relationship. But sexual extortion includes a variety of things, but one of the things that it also includes is the threat to distribute private sexual images against somebody's consent. So if somebody is threatening to disclose these images, that would be considered sexual extortion. There could possibly be identity theft, depending on what happened. It could be interference with privacy. And this is a statute that this year is being updated to make it clear around if somebody videotapes you or records you in some way, like inside the privacy of your home and obtains, and part of that video involves intimate parts, your intimate body parts, without your consent, that would be invasion with privacy. The statute was just updated based on a Supreme Court decision from last year. We'll talk more about that at New Laws if you want to know more about the updating of that statute. But so considering it could be interference with privacy if somebody is reporting. It could be stalking, it could be harassment or stalking, depending on what's happening there. Keeping in mind under harassment, the statute involves using part of the definition of harassment. One of the ways that you can harass somebody is using another's personal information without their consent to invite, encourage, solicit a third party to engage in a sex act with a person. So that would be like the posting on Craigslist saying that, Janie, who lives over at 123 Main Street, wants to have, sex with all the Johns, people named John in the state of Minnesota. I'm just making this up. But that would be a violation of that part of the harassment statute. I often refer to it as the Jenny Law because of the Tommy Two-Tone song where he sings about he got Jenny's phone number off a wall where it says for a good time call. That's a violation of that statute, so don't do that. In case you're wondering, don't write people's phone numbers on a wall and say for a good time call, because that's illegal. There's also, they're sending lots of letters or packages. Letters is broadly defined. It includes electronic letters under the statute and sending them many times and causing somebody to have to open them. That's also considered harassment in Minnesota. It's a different section of our harassment statute. Next slide. Thank you. There is a statute in Minnesota around computer damage. If somebody had installed spyware on a computer and it creates a situation where there's no bringing that computer back from having spyware on it, which is most of the time, and depending on the cost of said computer, it may rise to the level of computer damage. There is a specific amount of money that would need to be involved within that statute, and I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but that could potentially be an option. Ty's already talked about non-consensual dissemination of private sexual images, which is a crime in Minnesota. Also, there's a civil action that's also exists under the non-consensual dissemination of private sexual images. Some folks call that revenge porn. But in Minnesota, our statute is the non-consensual dissemination of images. There could also be the interception or disclosure of a wire or oral communications. That is when somebody does something to intercept a phone call or intercept a conversation that they might be having, like using different things like a baby monitor or some other way that they're intercepting communications. That's not legal in Minnesota. Minnesota is what we call a one-party state, which means at least one party to a conversation needs to know that it's being recorded or being recorded. And so if both parties to the conversation don't know that it's being recorded, then that's a violation of Minnesota law. Possessing any of the things that might allow somebody to intercept oral communication, that would also be a crime in Minnesota. And then And then finally, there's the prohibition on what's called a pen register or a trap trace device. And so that would be if they're putting a some sort of tracking device on a car, or other types of ways to track a person. So if for some reason there's lots of different kinds of tracking devices that exist in all sorts of different ways. But if one of those was put into a car, one of those was put into a child's backpack, or one of those was put into a stuffed animal, that's you have to have a warrant to be able to track somebody. So it would be a violation of the statute if somebody was tracking somebody without a warrant. So it's really important that we're talking with victims about technology. I know Ty has said it. I'm going to say it again. I think I'm going to say it again. It might be the third time I've said it. Talking to clients about their technology uses and about their needs, and then we're taking technology abuse very seriously. If the victim survivor wants to report this to law enforcement, there is the possibility of media coverage, depending on the circumstances, depending on a lot of circumstances. So having that conversation about what might that look like, and does that potentially put the victim survivor around safety? If there is something like knowing that, finding out that that their communications are being monitored or their location is being tracked, if that's happening or you believe that's happening, making sure to safety plan around if there's going to be a conversation with law enforcement. If that could put the victim in danger because of if you remove the device or you stop having those same kind of conversations, or if things really change, that could be a tip off to the abuser that there's something's going on, and that could put the victim survivor in danger. So making sure to safety plan. It isn't just as simple as, oh, I found a tracking device on my car, I'm going to take it off of this car and I'm going to destroy it or whatever. Keeping in mind that that could potentially put the victim survivor in some pretty significant danger, because now the abuser knows that their tracking has been found out, and they're also not going to be able to track. And so that could escalate things. So keeping things like that in mind. Also keeping in mind that it impacts very important parts of the client's life. Actually, I think just recently we got a call on the action line where a victim survivor was reporting some issues with some text messages, and law enforcement took their phone. Which they need to take the phone because they need to do the data dump, they need to get the information. Understandable, but preparing for the fact that law enforcement's going to take their phone, and they're going to probably have their phone for a goodly period of time. So talking with your law enforcement about how long are you going to have the phone, that kind of information, so that there can be, so you can prepare the client and make sure that there are other options for safety for them when they don't have their phone or they don't have their computer or whatever the thing is that law enforcement may be taking. And then always, of course, working with the client to identify what to them is best going to hold the perpetrator accountable, and making sure to not further victimize, endanger, or negatively impact the victim survivor. So what do they want? And how do we figure out how to reach what they want? And that can happen in a variety of different ways. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a calling of law enforcement to report crimes. They can happen in a variety of different ways. So thinking about, if they're harassing or monitoring, helping victim survivors know that there are options. And maybe that comes through an order of protection or a harassment restraining order, and including language around misuse of online spaces that might violate the order, or thinking about if there's already an order, do we need to amend that order to add the misuse of technology or online spaces? But we're going to talk about actually in a second about some other different ways that we can help hold offenders accountable, but doing so in a way that meets the victim survivor's needs.
So the next step, maybe to document the violations that have taken place. And this is really a critical piece for anyone who wishes to get a restraining order, possibly file a complaint with the police or work with an attorney, because the documentation can serve as evidence for doing any of those things for law enforcement or for, court and things. But remember, right now, though, they may not wish to call the police or to work with an attorney or file for an order. However, though, situations may change. And ultimately, they may determine that, hey, I do want to reach out to law enforcement about this. I do want to file an order. So, talking about documentation is going to be really important, and keeping of that documentation is going to be really important as well.
Hey, Ty, we also have a question asking about what do you know about law enforcement investigations when they do a phone dump and download everything that's on the phone? It's scary to not know what data is on the phone and how much of it would be shared with the defense as discovery. Yeah, it's definitely scary. So again, this is where advocacy relationships with your law enforcement are super important. So many law enforcement will say that when they're doing a phone dump, that okay, so you're coming to law enforcement saying I'm getting threatening text messages. Okay, so best practice is that law enforcement's only going to download the text messages from the person that these are supposed to be coming from, or from the phone numbers that you're saying it's coming from. Not all law enforcement may do that. Some law enforcement may do a much broader dump. Some may dump some other things in addition to the text messages. That's where it's really important for you as advocacy to be having these conversations ahead of time with your law enforcement about how and what and how broadly they're going to be obtaining that information, because it's important to be able then to explain to the victim survivor, okay, if we give our phone, this is the process they're going to follow. This is the information they're going to get, so the victim survivor can make an informed choice. And I think, again, anytime, if that's a possibility, although you've had your conversation ahead of time, confirm that information again with law enforcement before the victim turns over the phone in that individual case. I don't know, Ty, if you have more to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, it is super complicated when law enforcement does take your phone. I mean, I've had reports of pictures being sent to themselves and things like that, and so it is always really risky. One of the reasons why I always talk about keeping evidence and keeping digital copies of evidence and also a binder of evidence is so that you don't need to give law enforcement your laptop or your cell phone or whatever, that you have that evidence created in another document, or whether it's a hard drive or whether it's a binder, So that's what I suggest people to do, just because I have heard of instances where people go into law enforcement and report something, and then their phone is taken or the laptop is taken, and then other information in their devices then is also shared, and nobody wants that. Documentation, what to preserve. So with preserving of evidence, you want to preserve all of the evidence you think that is going to be relevant to their situation. That could be information about disputes, information in messages, emails, if they did a Google search and the name, photos, videos, things like that. Maybe posts on social media and things like that. Like, you can take screenshots of all of those things, but you want to preserve all the evidence that you feel like pertains to the situation. Even evidence that you believe is unfavorable to you. So you don't want to, only obtain some evidence and leave out some evidence, because you want to create a whole picture, right? So even if the evidence you feel like doesn't look good on you or for you, you want to save all of that. And an example of this could be text messages, right? Like, if you're gonna share text messages, you should also share the entire chain of conversation, not taking out some things that you might have said or whatnot, but like just share the entire conversation. So how to preserve and how to organize this evidence? Like I said, I always suggest a digital copy, and then also a printout and putting that in a binder or a folder somehow, having it in chronological order of dates and events. So for a digital copy, you can save the web pages as PDFs. You can take screenshots of pages, make sure to capture the entire screen, including the URL, so the address of the web page. If you're taking screenshots of posts and things like that, the time and the date. So just getting, and if you're doing screenshots of maybe like a text conversation or things, make sure that you're getting the name of the person that is texting and things on the top. I even do with the name, then I even go into like my contacts and also take a screenshot of how that relates to the person and the name and the number, just to back up all of that as well. And then if maybe it's a video, you can download that entire video to a secure hard drive. And then just making sure that if you, again, having the text messages or emails that you feel like will help support, be good evidence to help support the case, just making sure that you save all the copies of all the, save copies of all the messages. So I didn't go over the instructions on how to take a screenshot because there's just so many different ways that you can take screenshots depending on what type of computer you have, what type of phone you have. But what I find when people call us, what I tell them to go to is this site. It's www.take and then -a-screenshot.org. That site has multiple instructions on depending on what device you have on how to take screenshots. Again, preserving and organizing evidence is helpful. So the digital and the digital copy and the photocopy, because you can take the binder or that folder to your local police station, to a domestic violence organization, maybe to family court, self-help, to file papers. And then the printouts then, can also be used or attached to a police report, or if you're doing a order for protection or restraining order attached to that as well. While doing this, safety is an important consideration. So if they have been hacked, they might want to store evidence to a thumb drive. That can be like a flash drive or a USB stick instead of their hard drive. Or if they live with the abuser, they might want to find a safe, locked, private location to store the thumb drive and the binder. So just talking about safety of the evidence that they're collecting, what they're doing with that, and also helping them organize their evidence. There's that evidence chart that I didn't create the evidence chart, but I got the evidence chart from withoutmyconsent.org, and then they have resources there, and one of the resources is an evidence chart. So I didn't create it, but I got that evidence chart from them. And that evidence chart is super helpful. It has information to include, so it has things like the date. So you want to share the date of the event, listing the events in chronological order. So the chart can just serve as a timeline of events of things that have happened, as well as a guide to the evidence in support of the claim. So essentially just using that chart to kind of tell a story of, this happened on this date, and then on this date, this happened. So, and then also describing what happened. You want to describe like each event, each item briefly, enough clarity that someone who doesn't know much about the situation or doesn't know much about, that they can understand what's happening, right? But don't use vague descriptions. So saying things like, he's always texting me. Instead, you want to say actual facts. You want to say things like, I received 7 text messages between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. And one of the texts said this, and you can quote a text, and these texts are on my phone. I'm going to take screenshots of the text, and it's very, to me, because I'm not a lawyer, sounds very lawyery to me. Like, this is going to be exhibit A, and then you take the screenshots and printouts and, exhibits to the chart. But it sounds very lawyery. And so when I first started doing this, I was like, God, I'm not a lawyer. And I kind of chuckled to myself and laughed, but it wasn't that hard. The evidence, so you want to identify the evidence that they already have. And when I say do this, I'm not saying you do this for the survivor or the victim that you're working with. I suggest talking to them on how to do it. giving them examples on this so that they can do this themselves. But obviously, as an advocate, they might come back to you and just get more clarification and help. But I really want to encourage and empower people to be able to do some of this evidence keeping and things for themselves, so they don't accidentally delete something or have to wait till anything can happen with technology. Some of the evidence, if they have access to your computer and if you're waiting to talk to their advocate, in the meantime, the person could have deleted everything and then you lost all that evidence, right? So part of this is I'm not really suggesting for advocates to do all of this for the people that they're serving, but really teaching them how to do this for themselves, if possible. So again, talking about the screenshots, the PDFs, if that's evidence they already have, identify that. Is it a voicemail that's saved to the phone? Or maybe it's a statement that they'd be willing to make under oath that something happened the way that they said it did. Or is it maybe a third-party witness that would be willing to make that statement and write that up and then sign it? But making sure that the copies of the evidence, so if it's like a web page or as you're making copies of things, that it is high quality, that it's legible, that you can see it, and also documenting, like, if they don't know for a fact, or if there is like no evidence on who really did it, you might want to document, like, who do you think did it, right? And then identify the people that that were involved. That might help too. And any evidence that might help support that this is why you think that this person did it. So list any clues that you have, if there was any messages between you and them that reveal the identity of the sender. For example, like if the text displays the sender's name and the phone number, and then the ex-partner has threatened me with the photos in the past, things like that. Just depending on the information, whether it be through text messages, through emails, or whatever, that can serve as a clue to the person being the one to perpetrate or do that to you, right? Like, you want to collect all that evidence and have that on this evidence chart here. Or if you don't actually have the evidence, or maybe there's evidence that you need, there's also a column on this evidence chart too, on what evidence is it that you don't have but you want to get. Then you can list that there. You can describe briefly what they believe that evidence is, what they believe it will show, and where they're going to be able to get that evidence. So it really helps organize, is the whole point. That chart helps a person organize and think through all of the questions and think through what it is that they need. And also let victims know that when they reach out for assistance, like, just being prepared to talk about, like the 3 most recent incidents of abuse, and then the 3 worst incidents of abuse. That might not necessarily be the same thing, right? Like, the 3 most recent might be just like things that had happened maybe in April and early May. But the worst incidents of abuse might have happened last year, or maybe back in the fall, or maybe in January. And so that helps create that picture. Just separating those 2 things is going to be helpful too. And if there's more than 3 incidents, you can continue to fill out that evidence chart until they've documented every incident. Okay.
All right. And so if there is information that may exist somewhere else, like it's on a website or it's Facebook or it's Google or something, you've done the screenshots parts, but there is also other things that you can get through the provider themselves, which includes things like IP addresses, especially if you don't know or you can't prove for sure that that's that person. You might want to get an IP address. You can send something called a litigation hold letter to the company, which basically asks them to hold on to the materials until you're able to either get a subpoena or law enforcement's able to get a warrant, depending on what they're trying to do. And so you send this letter and it just says, hey, we're planning on taking legal action. Please don't delete this information, put it aside, because most companies do not keep this information, don't keep information for very long periods of time. It's just, there's so much nowadays that they just don't hold on to things. So but asking them to please hold on to it, and that at some point you'll be seeking that additional information. That can be useful even for a victim if they're not sure that they want to go forward with any sort of legal action. It can be useful even if they don't want to. Nope, I don't want to. It may still be worth doing a litigation hold letter because sometimes we change our minds. Or more stuff happens and it gets scarier or it gets more annoying or whatever. And so then they do reach a point where they decide that they would like to there's some sort of legal options. And so knowing that there's been that hold letter can help protect that information. I think I have an example. I'll pop it in I think we have a link to an example of one. I'll pop that in the chat.
All right. The next couple of slides is going to be talking about removing images. So, first off, how to find those images, right? So before you even know what images to remove, you should make a search. And that's what I'm saying, like when you're helping someone find images, just prepare them for what images might pop up. I mean, I've done this before and it could be some strong reactions sometimes. So just preparing the person that, hey, just brace yourself, like we're going to do this search. There might be some things that come up, but I'm going to help you remove them or whatnot, but have that conversation first before you do this. They might have heard that their intimate images were online, might be unsure which sites are hosting the images. And so we're going to talk about that, suggested ways to search for the images. First, doing a search by their name, using a search engine like Google or Bing to see if there's any offending material in the results. Another option is to conduct a reverse image search if they have access to the photo. And one site that offers this is Google, and their instructions for the reverse image site is just, you can Google reverse image search for Google and it'll come up and follow the instructions on there. But if there's concerns about an intimate video, they can take a screenshot of various frames of the video and then use the reverse image search function for that as well. If it's images that they took themselves, so if the photo or video was taken by the victim of themselves, they own the copyright to that. And to further protect themselves, they can register that image with the U.S. Copyright Office. Because that gives you the authority to demand the sites remove your images based on copyright infringement. That's also known as the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA takedown. So to submit that takedown notice, contact information for the site owner is needed. And this can be done by searching the domain name. So you can search it on domaintools.com. For additional information regarding the copyright and the DMCA process, without my consent, has created a guide that was really helpful for me, and I use this too as I'm talking to people, because I have like you're going to see the next couple of slides is going to talk about how to remove these images. I don't have them memorized. Okay, I usually will go to the site and I will look it up and follow it step by step, because it can be 7 or 8 steps to get things removed, but it is very self-explanatory as far as how the instructions go. I kind of popped it in these slides just so you all can see. You'll see it in the next few slides. You can see like how the instructions go and what it is that you need to do. That's on the things where you can remove it yourself. Some places you might need to request removal. So if someone else took the image and the victim, they don't own the copyright to that, you can still ask to have the website remove that intimate image if they didn't consent to the distribution of the image, right? So you can request image removal from the websites. But always keeping in mind that if images are removed before legal professionals or before anyone is able to use that, collect that as data or evidence, that is destroyed. So if that is removed before then that evidence has been destroyed. So think about this before you request image removal from sites and things, that you want to make sure you collect that evidence first before you ask for it to be removed. So getting that digital copy, getting that screenshot, making sure the URL is there and things like that before you send out a request for it to be removed. And also each website will have its own takedown policy. So most takedown policies are going to be found in the term of service language on their website. And there's going to be specific instructions for you to follow on how to make a request to have images removed from the website. So they all keep that information in their terms of service. It is like much easier to take down non-consensual porn content than it used to be, and a growing number of companies will voluntarily take that down on their platforms, regardless of whether you have the copyright to that or not. If you ask them to take that down, they will. And again, just remembering to preserve any of that content before you do ask for it to get removed. Okay.
In addition to asking the sites themselves asking them to take down any pictures or information, you might be able to also have that as a particular relief provision in either a harassment restraining order or an order of protection, depending. And there is unpublished case law in Minnesota in the Piddle case where Mr. Piddle was ordered to remove some photos and remove some language that was on a website that he was maintaining that was disparaging against the Westbrook Condominium Association. So there is some unpublished case law that supports the idea that that could be relief that's granted in a harassment restraining order or in an order for protection. And then failure to do so would be either contempt, more than likely, but it could also be a violation of the harassment restraining order or the order for protection.
Yeah, so the next couple of slides are going to be the slides that I talked about how to get to report a post or how to get things taken down. And Facebook, you want to click on the photo or video you want to report, just hover over it, and the options is going to be on the bottom right, and then you want to say that you want to either report it if it's a photo or a video, and then there's going to be reasons, like things are going to pop up every time you do a step. Another step will pop up on how you do that. And in Facebook, you're gonna you can select all of that, and then you can also track the status of the report in the support dashboard. But also, again, talking with victims about other options that they have, right? Other options other than just reporting it and things, because sometimes safety, again, we're going to go back to safety. Like, is that the safest thing to do? Other options can be, hide the post, that you can suggest that they just hide the post, block the person who posted it, unfriend the person who posted it. But just to keep in mind, though, when you do some of these things, this will keep the victim from seeing the post, but the person who's posting these things, they're and other people, they're still going to be able to see the content. And so unless you ask it to be removed, it's not going to be removed. It's just protecting them from seeing it, And so it's going to, and that's why talking with an advocate is really important around this. It's going to be, what is that content? It doesn't rise to the level of reporting it and risking the person who's posting that information to know that you are doing this, so it could cause potential other safety concerns. But as an advocate, that is our role to kind of think through and process that information with them, and just know that there is other options. And so maybe these other options might be the best route to go. The same with Instagram. If you see a post or profile that's not following their community guidelines, report that. That's fairly simple to do. You report that profile, and then they will take down that entire profile. And again, the instructions, I have it on here. for you to follow. So you can just, it's fairly simple to report a post or report a profile, and you just say that it's inappropriate. Whether it's an iOS or an Android, you can do that. And also with Instagram, when you report something, your information isn't shared with the person whose post or profile you're reporting. So, and also know that if you're reporting something and nothing is happening, if you keep reporting it, it's not going to impact that it's whether it's going to get removed or not, right? So it's not the number of times something gets reported. Instagram's going to go back and look at it and look at the content, look at what is happening. They're going to use that information versus, oh, this profile has been reported 7 times and then it escalates. That's not how it works for Instagram. Twitter, same way. There's instructions, you know, just clicking on the tweet and then following the instructions, and then reporting why is it, you know, is it a private image, is it an unauthorized photo, is it abusive, and things like that. All the sites have different things that you could categorize it as, but as long as it's categorized as one of those things, it's eligible to be reported. And then the user who posted the content will receive notification that they violated the rules of Twitter. And so they won't see the name or the information about the person who filed the report against them. So that's a benefit as well with Twitter. Well, and none of the sites like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they're not going to know that you're the whoever it is that reported it. That's never shown to them. So just want to say that. And any reported tweets and notifications, they're going to disappear from your timeline and notifications tab once you refresh the page. So if you don't refresh the page, it's just they're going to see it on there. But once you refresh it, if they're going to take it down, then you're going to see that that's when it gets removed. And also know that, you know, sometimes when you report a violating tweet or a violating account, it might not always result in the account being permanently suspended. In some instances, an account may first be locked temporarily, and then the content that you reported is going to be hidden from view, and then the user must delete it if they want to remain on like Twitter. So they're not just going to take it down. Sometimes that happens. And for Twitter, the difference between reporting a user and reporting a post, the difference between reporting a user and reporting a tweet is an entire account is dedicated to posting unauthorized images of you, or if your unauthorized image is an account's background picture or the avatar for that, then you want to report that as an entire user account, right? But if there's one specific tweet or one specific content, then you want to, or that's just one image that you don't want on there, then you want to report that individual tweet. So that's the difference between those two things. All right. I wanted to talk about this briefly, and we do have a couple of minutes. You know, at Standpoint, we've been hearing about it recently. And when I think of AI, when I think of artificial intelligence, I think of things like self-driving cars. I think of robots. I'm pretty sure everybody's heard of Chat GPT, right? That new AI software that you can type in and it makes reports, generates reports within a matter of seconds. And, you know, colleges are having concerns with it. I mean, it's a big deal, that Chat GPT. And it's free, like people can use it for free now. And then I also think of artificially created images. And so AI to me is fairly new, but it's actually been a concept. It's a concept that's been around since like the 1950s. And it's defined as a machine's ability to perform a task that would have previously required human intelligence. And that's a really broad definition, and one that has been changed, modified over decades of research and technological advances. And our level of intelligence sets us apart from other living beings, and it's essential to the human experience. But today's AI systems might demonstrate some traits of that human intelligence, including learning, problem solving, perception, and even a limited spectrum of creativity and social intelligence. How is artificial intelligence, how is that used as a tool for stalking? So the ways in which technology is impacting our lives is evolving almost on an hourly basis, right? And AI is at the forefront of this. So while it has the potential to increase efficiency and make information more widely available, it also can present risks, new risks, including the facilitation of intimate partner violence, child exploitation, and harassment. So we've talked, in the beginning of our presentation about, how technology, how cyber internet, how all of that can be used as a surveillance tool. But AI actually, well, now that AI is in the picture, it enables offenders to track and monitor with greater ease and precision than ever before. So the AI-powered algorithms could, for example, analyze and predict a person's movements just by gathering data from an array of sources. Like this happens with, how me and Rana were talking about, you go in and you have to Google, you type your name, then you go into this site, and then you got to do this, and then you got to do that. With AI, they do all of this so fast, and they can gather all of these sources from social media posts to geotagged pictures to even like where their location is right now, where they happen to have posted it. So it just becomes a stronger tool. And also have facial recognition technology that is powered by AI. It's far more effective than humans at identifying individuals from images or videos. So like you guys might all be familiar with, like when you go on Facebook and you post a picture and you're posting a picture with like a group of people, and then Facebook will like identify who's in that picture with you. They're using AI technology, right? They're using technology to be like, oh, hey, that looks like Rana in that picture with you, Ty. So then they're gonna say, do you want to tag Rana? And sometimes there's people that look like me. So like when I have 3 daughters, so whenever I post a picture of myself and my 3 daughters, like they think we're all the same person because it's using AI technology. Sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not. But the danger in that is that with the AI technology, they're able to identify from multiple images, multiple videos, even when the quality is low, or even if the person is like partially obscured, like the AI can still pick that up. And stalkers could track victims in real time through the surveillance cameras that social media or other online sources, like what the city might be using for cameras and things like that. And so with access to these databases, for example, members of law enforcement, they could technically exploit some of this information. And I'm not saying that law enforcement are gonna, like, they're bad people. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying people who have access to some of these databases, that it could potentially be used to harm. And so, the AI-powered software, it analyzes just so much information in a blink of an eye. It enables people to monitor and track online activity, digital footprint, browsing history, emails, downloads, and gain insights into people's daily lives, and then use this information to manipulate, control, and blackmail them. And so just knowing that this is something that's out there, I didn't really hear about it too much, but just after a couple of weeks, I've been hearing about it more. And so I wanted to just make sure that I mentioned it on here for you all. And let us know, is this something you all have been hearing too? That's the kind of information that we like to hear at Standpoint. So you might have seen a photo of the Pope wearing a puffer jacket, and you might have thought that that was real, right? In fact, that is also an image created by AI. So AI powered tools, they can create convincing impersonations of people through voice synthesis and like text generation. So offenders can use that AI powered tools to fabricate text messages or emails that appear to come from trusted sources. They can use that access to threaten or deceive victims, isolate them from their support network. They can manipulate digital evidence to frame someone for a crime. In the last few months, there's been reports of scammers using AI to sound like a family member in distress, and they do this to con people out of thousands of dollars. So those reports have been shared. My daughter sent me something on a TikTok once about this happening to someone, and the voice sounded exactly like her daughter, was crying, was talking in distress, and so it's super scary for that person, but that was also a capability of what AI can do. And abusers and scammers could use similar techniques to just convince someone to send them intimate images to be used later to exploit them or manipulate them. So just wanting to, you know, talk about that and share that information with you all, just so you're aware of how fast technology is changing. Um, the AI-powered image generating systems, because they allow people to manufacture photos and videos that is almost impossible to detect as being fake. That's where that deepfake technology comes in. And as and Rana's going to talk a little bit about deepfake in the next slide, so I won't go more into that. But also for child abuse and exploitation and trafficking, they can use that AI to recruit victims. Currently, there are cases of adult predators impersonating teens to target minors for grooming, sexual abuse, and trafficking. And as kids and teens, you know, they're more inclined to appear as, you know, appear as someone that they can trust and things. And so when predators are posing as that, they're gaining information on their social media. They're gaining access to that kid about where they're going, what their interests are, and things to be able to learn about them and know about them and manipulate them and possibly victimize them.
Yeah, and just real fast, and like I said, we'll talk more about this at New Laws. But Minnesota's legislature has introduced a deepfake legislation around deepfakes as it specifically relates to non-consensual dissemination of private sexual images. And so this would be the creation of a sexual image that we're taking that never actually occurred, right? So taking the head of somebody and putting it on a body or something like that. This legislation, I believe, has passed both House and the Senate and is going to the governor for signature. There's all indications the governor is going to sign this. So we'll have more to say about this at New Laws. So come join us in August or September and we'll talk more about it. But just know that there is as this is happening fairly what feels really fast, like the idea and the concept seems to be moving really quickly, that there is legislation at the Minnesota legislature to make this a crime and to address this. There's also a civil side.
Thank you. Might be over a couple of minutes.
Yep.
But if you have any questions, if you, you know, we certainly follow up with us, call our action line, email us. I've already gotten a couple of emails for the safety plan. Happy to share that with you all. So yeah, reach out to us with any questions that you have. I don't want to go over any more than what we've already done, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Rana and Ty. I put the link to New Laws in the chat as well, and those dates will be, look for those next week to come to your save the date.
All right, thank you.